Hello, all. This is Professor Boza speaking. Um, I wanted to personally talk to you about the principle of double effect because out of all the things that we're going to be discussing or have discussed in this course, the principle of double effect will be with you for the rest of your life. We will always have loved ones who are in need of medical care, and a lot of times the medical care can cause problems as well as being healing for the person. And we have to make a distinction. And sometimes these moral dilemmas are going to be very difficult. And so my hope is that you keep this video with you and refer to it as is necessary as you move along in life. As you can see on the slide, there we could foresee a possibility of both good and evil happening in any given action. And the principle of double effect assists us in determining whether or not one's actions are morally justifiable. So let's define it for a minute. The principle of double effect is one act which is good in itself and has two effects: the intended good effect and the unintended but evil foreseen effect. I think it's important that I emphasize at this moment that the principle of double effect is only justified if there are no other alternatives that could be used for the treatment of this patient. And this it's quite simple. The reason why for this, because by definition, the principle of double effect includes an evil, even if it is an unintended evil, it still includes one. And so we have to be very, very careful of this. And if there are other treatments available, then we must be able to use them before we resort to double effect. The second criteria directs us that the action that we want to do is good in itself, or at least morally neutral. We can't be doing evil so that good can come from it. I'll give you an example. Sometimes with women with severe preeclampsia, they'll be directed to have an abortion so this way they can save their life. Or that's not the principle of double effect, because an abortion is an intrinsically evil act, and we can't be doing that for the sake of some good that can come from it. So we need to be really careful with this, because a lot of times people make decisions thinking that they're appealing to double effect when they're really not. So the act has to be good, or it has to be neutral. The third criteria for the principle of double effect is that the evil that's involved must not be intended. And when we look at this, we would think, well, why would we even have to have this criteria? But I'd like to give you an example of sometimes how this can be violated when we're talking about palliative care. When people have severe pain, one of the best ways to handle that is to administer morphine. Now, morphine will, in fact, dull the pain and make the person comfortable, but it also has the effect of depressing one's respiration. And so what you'll find is that often people will administer morphine to a patient, and then they wind up dying maybe in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. I often find my students come to me after this particular lesson racked with guilt. And I have to walk with them the idea that if they are administering the dose that's pertinent for this patient and nothing more, then they're applying this principle of double effect. We don't want to be able to allow for a lethal dose of any medication, because that's violating everything, and we don't want to do that. But at the same time, we have to come to terms with the idea that when we do administer an opioid of some sort, respiration is going to decrease and a person will die sooner rather than later. That's the evil effect that we foresee and that we know. And so we don't want to kill the person by appealing to double effect. And especially in this instance, we don't want to administer any lethal dose of anything. At the same time, we have to accept the fact that death is going to come earlier. In this criteria, we restate what we say all the time in moral theology. We can't do an evil so that good can come from it. Very, very important. We've said this before in this video, and I think that this is something that we need to always keep in the back of our minds. The other thing, too, that's important in this one is that the ends do not justify the means. It doesn't. And we shouldn't use a proportionalist attitude to say, okay, well, if I do this, it's evil, but something good at the end is going to happen. We talked about proportionalism before in this course, and this is where we could find it rear its ugly head in the practice of bioethics and moral theology. Finally, the good consequence must be proportionate to the evil consequence. This is typical of what we call in bioethics a principle of proportionate risk. Is this medical intervention going to be more harmful than it is good? Well, obviously we wouldn't administer that if that was the case. And so it's the same principle with double effect. If I'm going to administer morphine, say, to a person who is in pain, is the good effect going to outweigh the possibility of this person dying sooner rather than later? Well, obviously we know that we can't keep a person in pain, and it wouldn't be humane to do that. So there's a direct proportion of good versus the evil in that particular scenario. So this particular criteria will now help us to build a relationship between the consequences themselves. What is good? What is evil? What is going to be proportionately better for the patient? And then we move accordingly.